Imagine you took every single apocalyptic scenario humanity has ever dreamed up. Nuclear war, asteroid impact, gamma-ray bursts from across the galaxy, the complete boiling away of Earth's oceans, and you lined them all up, one after the other, like a gauntlet of total annihilation. Now imagine one creature walked through all of them, unfazed, unchanged, basically bored. That creature exists. It's alive right now. It's probably living within a few meters of you at this very moment, and it is so fundamentally, so profoundly, so absurdly wrong by the standards of normal biology that scientists have spent decades trying to understand it and are still finding new reasons to be shocked. It has survived all 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history. It has survived being launched into the vacuum of space with no protection. It can go without food or water for 30 years and then wake up like nothing happened. It can withstand radiation doses that would kill a human 1,000 times over. And it does all of this while being, at most, 0.5 millimeter long, invisible to the naked eye. Its name is the tardigrade, and nothing, absolutely nothing, about this animal is normal. My name is Max, and today we are going down the rabbit hole on the most extraordinary creature that has ever existed on this planet. By the end of this video, you will question everything you thought you knew about the limits of life. Stay with me, because this one is genuinely mind-blowing. Part 1. What even is a tardigrade? Before we get into the insane abilities, let's start with the basics, because even the basics are weird. Tardigrades are microscopic animals. Emphasis on animals, not bacteria, not single-celled organisms, not some weird fungus. They are fully fledged animals with a head, a body, legs, a nervous system, muscles, and a digestive system. They eat, they reproduce, they have genders. They are animals in every meaningful, biological sense of the word. They were first discovered in 1773 by a German pastor named Johann August Ephraim Guse, who called them Kleiner Wasserbär, little water bears. And if you've ever seen a tardigrade under a microscope, you understand exactly why. They look like microscopic 8-legged bears wading through water in slow motion, chubby, stubby, with a face that somehow looks simultaneously alien and adorable. Scientists later renamed them tardigrades, from the Latin for slow stepper. There are over 1,300 known species of tardigrades. They live on every single continent on Earth, including Antarctica. They live in the ocean, in freshwater, in soil, in sand, on the surface of mosses and lichens, in rainforests, in deserts, on the top of the Himalayas, and in the deepest ocean trenches. If there is a habitat on Earth, a tardigrade has probably colonized it. They are, by every scientific measure, the most widespread animal on the planet. And yet, most people have never heard of them, never seen them, and have no idea they're sharing their backyard moss with one of the most extraordinary life forms in the history of Earth. That changes today. Part 2. The cryptobiosis, superpower that defies biology. Here's where things start getting genuinely, fundamentally strange. When a tardigrade encounters conditions that would kill basically any other living thing, extreme dryness, extreme cold, extreme heat, lack of oxygen, toxic chemicals, it doesn't die. It doesn't even really try to survive in the conventional sense. It does something that biologists had never seen before and still struggle to fully explain. It enters a state called cryptobiosis. The word comes from the Greek for hidden life, and that name is about as accurate as a name can be, because what the tardigrade does in cryptobiosis is essentially stop being alive without dying. Here's what happens mechanically. When conditions get bad, say the environment starts drying out, the tardigrade pulls in all 8 of its legs, tucks its head inside its body, and contracts itself into a tiny, barrel-shaped blob called a ton. In this ton state, the tardigrade's metabolism drops to less than 0.01% of its normal rate. Its water content, normally about 85% of its body mass, just like most animals, drops to around 3%. 3%. For context, a human being will die of dehydration when they lose roughly 15% of their body water. At 3% water content, there is almost nothing left in the tardigrade's body. It is, by almost every physical definition, completely desiccated, a dry husk. And yet, it is not dead. The tardigrade can stay in this tune state for decades. Studies have found viable tardigrades in museum specimens of dried moss that were over 100 years old. You add water, and they wake up. They unfurl, extend their legs, shake themselves off, and go back to eating and reproducing as if nothing happened. Nothing about this is normal. Part 3. The temperature extremes that should be impossible. Let's talk about heat and cold, because the tardigrade's relationship with temperature is one of the most absurd things in all of biology. In tune form, tardigrades have been exposed to temperatures of minus 272 degrees Celsius. That is 1 degree above absolute zero, the theoretical lowest temperature that can exist in the universe, where all molecular motion essentially stops. At those temperatures, materials become quantum strange. Chemistry ceases to function. Everything freezes into a state that we barely have language to describe. The tardigrades survived. Scientists at the University of Stuttgart suspended tardigrades in liquid helium, which exists at minus 269 degrees Celsius, for several hours. When they were thawed, the tardigrades woke up and resumed normal activity. Now let's go the other direction. Tardigrades in tune form have survived temperatures of 151 degrees Celsius, significantly above the boiling point of water. They've also survived flash heating to over 100 degrees Celsius for brief periods even when fully hydrated and active, which is even more remarkable since water is boiling at that temperature. The range of temperatures a tardigrade can survive, from near absolute zero to well above boiling, is essentially the full range of temperatures you would encounter anywhere in the solar system, and most places beyond it, which turns out to be very relevant. But we'll get to that. Part 4. Radiation resistance. That makes no physical sense. Here is the moment in the video where I need you to really pay attention, because what I'm about to tell you about tardigrades and radiation is the thing that keeps biologists up at night. Radiation kills living things by damaging DNA. When high-energy particles or rays pass through biological tissue, they break chemical bonds, create free radicals, and shatter the double helix structure of DNA strands. When enough DNA damage accumulates, cells can't function, they can't replicate, and the organism dies. The lethal radiation dose for a human being is around 4 to 8 grays, a unit of radiation absorption. That's it. 8 grays, and you're in serious life-threatening trouble. The lethal dose for a tardigrade? Studies suggest it's somewhere around 570,000 grays for X-ray radiation, and over 6,000 grays for heavy ion radiation. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. The tardigrade requires roughly 100,000 times the radiation dose that kills a human being before it will die from radiation exposure. How? How does this make any sense? For a long time, scientists assumed tardigrades must just have incredibly efficient DNA repair mechanisms, ways of stitching their broken DNA back together faster than the radiation could damage it, and that's partially true. But then researchers discovered something even stranger. Tardigrades produce a unique protein that no other animal on Earth makes. It's called ZUP, short for damage suppressor. And what DUP does is physically wrap around the tardigrade's DNA like a protective shield, physically blocking radiation particles from reaching the DNA strands in the first place, not repairing the damage after it happens, preventing the damage from happening at all. Scientists were so stunned by this discovery that they immediately tried inserting the gene for DSUP into human cells in laboratory conditions, and it worked. Human cells expressing the SUP protein showed 40% less radiation damage than normal human cells when exposed to X-rays, a tardigrade protein, making human cells more resistant to radiation. The implications of that for cancer treatment, for space travel, for radiation medicine are enormous and are actively being researched right now. Part 5. They already went to space twice. In 2007, the European Space Agency did something that sounds like a science fiction plot. They took tardigrades, attached them to the outside of a spacecraft, exposed, unprotected, directly to the vacuum of space, and launched them into orbit, not inside a capsule, not in a pressurized container, on the outside of the spacecraft, facing direct exposure to the vacuum of space, cosmic radiation, and the full, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation of the sun. They were out there for 10 days. When the spacecraft returned and scientists retrieved the tardigrades, a significant portion of them were still alive. Some had even reproduced during the experiment. They had laid eggs in space, in the vacuum of space, without air, without water, exposed to solar radiation levels that would be instantly lethal to any other animal, and they reproduced. The eggs hatched successfully back on Earth. The offspring were normal and healthy. Space had not broken the tardigrades. If anything, space seemed almost irrelevant to them. In 2019, an Israeli spacecraft called Bereshit crashed into the moon while carrying a payload that included, you guessed it, thousands of dehydrated tardigrades in tune state. The spacecraft was destroyed on impact. The tardigrades were scattered across the lunar surface, where they remain to this day, exposed to lunar temperature swings from 127 degrees Celsius during the day to minus 173 degrees at night, and to unfiltered cosmic radiation with no atmosphere to protect them. Are they still viable? Could they be revived if someone collected them and added water? Scientists believe the answer is yes, though we'd need to retrieve them to find out. Somewhere on the moon, right now, there is a colony of dehydrated tardigrades, potentially still viable, waiting for water that will never come, unless we bring it. Part 6. The Evolutionary Mystery. Nobody can fully answer. Here's the question that should be burning in your mind right now. Why? Why does a half-millimeter animal that lives in moss need to survive the vacuum of space? Why does it need to tolerate temperatures close to absolute zero? Why does it need to withstand radiation doses 100,000 times lethal to humans? Moss doesn't produce gamma rays. Puddles don't reach absolute zero. This is one of the great open questions in evolutionary biology, and the answers that scientists have proposed are fascinating. The most accepted explanation is that tardigrade superpowers are actually adaptations for surviving desiccation, extreme drying. Moss and lichen, the primary habitats for tardigrades, can dry out completely when exposed to sun and wind. An animal living in that environment needs to survive complete drying on a regular basis. And it turns out that desiccation, removal of water, causes very similar biological damage to freezing, to radiation, and to other extreme stresses. The same mechanisms that let a tardigrade survive drying out also, as a side effect, let it survive radiation, extreme cold, and vacuum. The tardigrade didn't evolve specifically to survive space. It evolved to survive dry moss, and in doing so, it accidentally became the most cosmically robust animal on Earth. But there's a more controversial and genuinely mind-bending alternative hypothesis: panspermia. Panspermia is the idea that life, or the building blocks of life, can travel between planets, carried on asteroids or debris ejected by planetary collisions. If a meteorite impact could blast tardigrades off Earth's surface into space, and if tardigrades can survive the journey, could life have spread from Earth to other planets, or from other planets to Earth? Some scientists take this seriously, not as the primary explanation for life's origin on Earth, but as a genuine possibility for how life could spread through a solar system over geological timescales. The tardigrade's existence doesn't prove panspermia, but it does prove that the biological barrier to interplanetary travel, which we assumed was insurmountable, is not necessarily insurmountable at all. Part 7. The Genome That Broke the Rules. In 2015, scientists at the University of North Carolina published a genomic analysis of tardigrades that caused an absolute uproar in the biology community. Their conclusion: approximately 17% of the tardigrade genome came from other species, bacteria, fungi, plants, and other organisms, through a process called horizontal gene transfer. Horizontal gene transfer is when genes move between species that aren't parent and offspring. It happens in bacteria all the time. It's actually one of the main ways bacteria develop antibiotic resistance. But in complex animals, it was supposed to be extremely rare, negligible, essentially impossible at the scale the North Carolina team was claiming. 17% would mean tardigrades had essentially absorbed genes from hundreds of other species over their evolutionary history. incorporating foreign DNA into their own genome and expressing those genes as functional proteins. The diazoep radiation shield protein appears to have originated from horizontal gene transfer. The unique sugars tardigrades produced during cryptobiosis, possibly borrowed from bacteria or plants. Tardigrades may have essentially been collecting genetic tools from the environment throughout their evolutionary history, a living, breathing library of borrowed biology. Subsequent studies have revised the estimate downward, suggesting the true number is closer to 1 to 2% rather than 17%, with the higher estimate partly being a result of contamination in the original samples. But even 1 to 2% horizontal gene transfer in a complex animal is extraordinary, and the genes that were transferred appear to be precisely the ones responsible for the tardigrade's most remarkable survival abilities. This animal didn't just evolve its superpowers, it may have collected them. Part 8. What tardigrades mean for the future of science. Let's zoom out and talk about why any of this matters beyond pure fascination, because the tardigrade isn't just a curiosity, it's a roadmap. The diazoep protein is already being studied for applications in radiation medicine and cancer therapy. If you can protect healthy cells from radiation damage during cancer treatment, you can use higher doses to kill tumors while reducing side effects for the patient. Clinical applications are still years away, but the research is active and progressing. The mechanisms tardigrades use to survive desiccation, including unique sugars called trehalose that form a glass-like protective matrix around cells when water is removed, are being studied for applications in vaccine storage and drug preservation. Currently, many vaccines require continuous refrigeration throughout their entire supply chain, the cold chain, which makes delivery to remote or developing world locations extremely difficult. Tardigrade-inspired desiccation technology could allow vaccines to be stored dry, at room temperature, and reconstituted with water at the point of delivery. That's not theoretical. Companies are already working on it. The tardigrade's DNA repair and protection mechanisms are being studied for applications in extending the viability of human cells for organ transplantation. The window for transplanting a donated organ is extremely short, hours in many cases, because cells begin dying without oxygen and nutrients. Tardigrade-inspired preservation could extend that window dramatically, saving countless lives. And then there's space exploration. If humans are ever going to travel beyond the solar system, journeys that would take thousands of years, we need ways to preserve biological material, or potentially even living organisms, for impossibly long periods. The tardigrade is the proof of concept that long-duration biological preservation is not a fantasy. 1/2 millimeter animal, discovered in pond water, is quietly revolutionizing medicine, biotechnology, and our understanding of life's possibilities. Part 9, the bigger question, are we alone? Here's where I want to leave you, because the tardigrade doesn't just challenge what we know about biology on Earth, it challenges what we know about life in the universe. For most of scientific history, we've assumed that life requires very specific conditions to exist: liquid water, moderate temperatures, protection from radiation, a stable environment. These assumptions have guided our search for life elsewhere in the solar system and beyond. We look for planets in the habitable zone, not too hot, not too cold, because we assume life needs what life on Earth generally needs. But the tardigrade breaks that assumption completely. If a complex multicellular animal can survive the vacuum of space, radiation levels far beyond anything found on Earth's surface, temperatures from near absolute zero to above boiling, and decades without any water, then our definition of habitable needs to expand dramatically. Europa, Jupiter's ice moon, has a liquid water ocean beneath its frozen surface, exposed to intense radiation from Jupiter's magnetic field. We ruled it out as habitable for complex life, partly because of that radiation. The tardigrade would disagree. Mars, with its thin atmosphere and high radiation surface, its extreme cold and dust storms, has been considered too harsh for life as we know it. The tardigrade has survived conditions harsher than anything on Mars's surface in laboratory experiments. This tiny, bare-faced, microscopic animal has expanded the possibility space for life in the universe, not by being alien, but by being so extraordinarily, stubbornly, almost defiantly alive in conditions where life has no right to exist. We started this video with the idea of a creature that laughed at the apocalypse, and I hope by now you see that this wasn't hyperbole. The tardigrade has genuinely survived every mass extinction event in Earth's half-billion-year history of complex life. It has survived space. It has survived radiation that would kill you 100,000 times over. It can survive for decades without any water, any food, or any detectable sign of life, and then wake up and keep going. And it does all of this while being smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. In science, we sometimes talk about model organisms, species that teach us fundamental truths about biology. The fruit fly taught us about genetics. The zebrafish taught us about development. The tardigrade is teaching us something even bigger. It's teaching us about the very definition and limits of life itself. Next time you walk through a patch of moss, in your backyard, in a park, on the side of a building, remember that you're walking past a civilization of creatures that have been surviving the impossible for over 500 million years. Creatures that have outlasted the dinosaurs, outlasted every ice age, outlasted every catastrophe this planet has ever thrown at life. They were here before us. And if things go badly wrong for our species, they will almost certainly be here long after us. The tardigrade doesn't care about your apocalypse. It's seen worse, and it has absolutely no intention of going anywhere.